Was over in Germany and England and Italy and those places, they had it pretty tough. But we were lucky. We flew our missions and didn't have any problems to come back safely. We had problems. I mean, people shot at us, no doubt about that. We had flak and small arms fire and stuff like that. We flew those bombers. We stopped it at 300 feet on some of our missions. And some missions we took off before daylight, didn't get back to after dark.
Okay.
16 and a half hours.
Wow.
We flew the longest missions at that time till the B-29s come in.
Well, you have extra fuel tanks in the fuselage or what?
Yeah, we had 2 bomb bay tanks. We could only carry 2 or 4 bombs.
Wow. No, whenever, but whenever you guys, if a plane went down or you had mechanical issues, you're probably done.
What was that?
If your plane went down in those jungles,
There wasn't much chance.
you'd never survive.
If the Japs didn't get you, the Burmese did. They was about as bad as the Japs were.
Really?
Yeah, the boys went down, did they never came back. The boys, when we got over there, we didn't get there until September of 44. And they had things in pretty good shape. The Japs were coming up and just getting ready to go into India. But they started pushing pretty hard on them and kind of started pushing them back. And just as we got there, and we never had a fighter. We saw a couple, but they never come near us because they didn't have that many left. And so our job was just bombing bridges, supply dumps, airfields, and things like that to try and keep them from getting supplies so they could push them, keep on pushing them back. And the ground forces, they were doing a pretty good job at that time. And on our last mission, that was in about July, I guess it was, we went to airfields down below Rangoon, bombed it, and on the way home, we flew over the task force from England, from English. There was 55 ships in it, a aircraft carrier, a couple of battleships, cruisers, troop ships, and we knew where they were headed. We flew over them. That was a sight to see. And we got back our base, and about 2 weeks later, we heard Rangoon fell. And that was the end of the Japs in Burma then.
No,
we had a couple trips to China. Flew over the hump to China. One was hauling some supplies. We were continually hauling gas and supplies to China. Our outfit was. But I only had 2 trips. I went up one time. Next time we went up, we was on detached service. And we was up there for a month. And it was for the same reason, because we couldn't fly missions because of the monsoons. And so they set us up there, and our crew was out. They didn't use the gunners because the Japs were too far down, and they wouldn't near us anymore. So they hauled gas and supplies up. And a lot of that gas was used for the B-29 to get back from their trips to Japan. They didn't have enough, so they'd take off for India and fly across China to Japan and drop their bombs, and then come back, then they'll land at Luoyang and pick up just enough gas to get them back to their field in India.
wow.
And that was in June, April, May, and June, that part of the time.
When did you bomb the Kwai River Bridge?
That was the 13th of February, 1945. I won't forget that one. I guess that was my 15 seconds of fame. There was 3 of us went in on it. And we went in at 300 feet. Dropped delayed action bombs. They had 7 seconds delayed action. And the commander went in on the first. He got the first bay. We went over and got the second. When I'm being a tail, I could just see that stuff flying up the air. Well, it was only couple 100 feet away from it. And I could see the stuff flying up in the air, and I knew we had a hit. And but the thing about it was, we were in a left-hand bank coming off the bridge, and till we got up this valley and get some altitude, there's a steam engine sitting down here on the left side, and I tried to get my guns down on it, and it wouldn't go down that far. So I looked over to the right, and I saw a compound there. We was getting small arms fire from that. So I turned around, opened up on that, and put a few blasts down in there. And then about that time we hit the flak. And they were throwing flak pretty good at us. And there was 4 right off the right rudder. And every one up right the same spot. If he'd have been just a few feet faster, he'd have got us.
Wow. So you were the tail gunner?
Yeah, I was tail gunner. I always saw where we've been, not where we're going.
Yeah. Did the third plane hit the bridge? Do you know?
What was that?
Did the third plane hit the bridge that was on?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't get any damage from that one.
Huh.
When we come over to the service, we never thought any more about it. That was it. It was dead. We went back, tried to get a life together, and go from there. I went to drafting school. I didn't want to go to college, and nobody talked about it. In 1967, I picked up the evening paper one day. Here's a picture of a bridge. I said, "Well, Mary Lou, we bombed that bridge." And then I seen it at the bottom, I started reading it, and it said Canterbury, and I knew it was it then, positively, because that's what it was. So that's the very bridge we went over. And what they had a big visitation about it. Some of the Japs and some of the American people went over too. And they had a big story in the paper about it. So I wrote to our local newspaper and asked them if they could tell me who wrote that story. Because we had only dropped 4 bombs. 2 bombs. We only dropped 2 bombs on that one. And when we got one with the bridge, but one of them ricocheted, went up, and went off right next to our prisoner camp. And I always wondered if we ever got anybody or heard anybody up there. And I checked every once in a while. I wanted to check with them, so if the guy wrote it, might be able to give me somebody that was familiar with it. And finally, a book about The Last Man Out. I read it. And he was stationed at that place. But he said that day, I wrote him a letter, and he said that day that they were down in Canterbury, they said they heard the airplanes, but they never seen them. They said, "Get that damn bridge." So, and I asked him about that. He said, no, they never heard of anybody being hurt. Wow. So that made me feel a lot better, because I'd hate that thing went off up there and taking out a lot of our own men. We also used a Azon bomb. That was a control bomb, controlled laterally. They sent it over to the 9th Squadron. They wouldn't have enough to do with it. They took all the equipment out of their airplanes. They wouldn't have enough to do with it. So they turned it over to us, the 493rd. And so we installed it, started practicing with it. It was working out pretty good. So we started doing missions with it. Well, the first couple of missions wasn't too good. Bombs, they did get to control of them, some of them. And some of them had defects in them. They wouldn't go out very well. But anyhow, finally they started going pretty good. And our bombardier did pretty darn good with them. They said they tried those also in Germany, but they didn't work very good. Well, Germany, they were bombing from 20 and 25,000 feet. We were bombing at 6,000 or 7,000. And those boys, we had a much better view of that bomb going down there at 7,000 feet than they would at 20,000. So I think that was a big problem in Germany. But it worked pretty good for us. We had pretty good success with them. And then later on to come in with a control both ways, but that was after the war was over.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's amazing to hear that.